What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Scouting the Fins. This is our very last episode with our pre-draft series. Today's show, obviously, is brought to you by Thompson Cigar. Go to thompsoncigar.com to go ahead and buy some cigars. Use promo code 3yards20 to get 20% off your order of $75 or more. Once again, use promo code 3yards20 for 20% off your order of $75 or more. I'm joined by the rest of our co-hosts, Coach and Eric. Gentlemen, how are we doing today?
Doing well. How about yourself?
I'm okay. We got 1 week left, and around this time, I think we'll expect who the Miami Dolphins will pick. Obviously, it's around 10 p.m. about where I'm at on Thursday night where we're recording at. We're going to see a lot of reactions for the first round for the Dolphins. Good, bad. Some might be calling for Chris Greer's head. Others might be saying this was definitely a steal. So I'm excited to see how it'll go.
Yeah, I think that, we're a week from the draft, and the Dolphins, based on the way that they've handled free agency, have made it somewhat clear what they need to do in the draft, right? The order that they are going to do it is going to upset somebody, right? No matter what happens, there's going to be fans that really like the pick or picks, and there's going to be fans that absolutely hate it no matter what. That's just the nature of the beast, but it's always a fun conversation to talk about the different options that could be there.
Absolutely. And I think we'd be remiss, number one, to kind of not hit on some of the news that we've gotten over the last week or so. Personally, I was kind of worried we were heading into that silly season of draft coverage where there's really nothing to talk about except for the same guys over and over again and just nitpick them to death. But there's certainly been no shortage of things to talk about for the Miami Dolphins, particularly in the skill position rooms on offense and on defense. Obviously, there's kind of been the rumors swirling around Tyreek Hill for a long time. And then, rumor comes out about Jalen Ramsey last week, and it's seemingly confirmed by Ian Rappaport. Although Chris Greer vehemently denies that, but I don't know. I think that where there's smoke, there's fire as far as that's concerned. And it just really throws a pretty interesting wrench into the Dolphins' plans for round one and round two. Just hearing the news on this stuff as we bring in Alf. You can follow him at Alf Arteaga. Does the 3 yards per carry stuff. The boss around here. Welcome aboard, Alf. I'll go with you first, actually. I'll start it off. Your reaction to the flurry of Jalen Ramsey news, and kind of, do you think that it's going to affect their plans going forward, or do you think that's something that's kind of been baked into what they've been planning to do for a while?
Yeah, that's been kind of baked in. Like, we were talking about this on the pod and on OnlyFins for a while now. And you figured it was going to come from Tyreek. Like, we knew that they wanted more than 3 top 100 picks. Okay, they wanted another day 2 pick, and we always thought we were going to get it from a Tyreek Hill trade. Well, it turns out that they're going to get it from a Jalen Ramsey trade. What just makes it difficult to understand is that extension that they gave him this past season, especially after what Jalen Ramsey did in training camp, which was essentially fake an injury. Okay, that's basically what he did, and it all coincided with Patrick Surtain's new deal, and sure enough, Jalen Ramsey now has a lower extremity injury, and 2 days later, he's back on the field. He looks perfectly fine, and he has a contract that pays him $100,000 more than Patrick Surtain. So this goes right back to Chris Greer. This guy did this to the Jaguars, then he did it to the Rams, and somehow Chris Greer thought he wasn't going to do it to him. None of this would have been a problem if he had not given him that extension. But think about it. He gave it to him twice. He gave him 2 new contracts, and he played here for 2 years. And one of those years, he missed 8 games. So it is what it is.
Yeah, I on the offseason podcast there, Alf, you made an analogy of a tiger and eating the trainer or whatever, and expecting
Yeah.
it not to do the same thing, right? And that's a perfect analogy there. Like we all kind of knew who Jalen Ramsey was for that perspective. Like you said, he's forced himself out of multiple teams before. He forced the Dolphins' hand last year in giving him another restructure. And I kind of wonder whether that was what happened again this year, where he was looking for another restructure, some money up front. And, was this the point where Chris Greer said, no, we're not going to do that anymore? And Jalen Ramsey's like, okay, well, you're not playing by my rules. I want out, right? I think that, what makes that a little difficult is that I think he's going to do the same thing to choose where he goes. Like he can tell it, like we can trade him wherever we want, right? But he can tell that team, hey, I'm not going to show up. I'm not going to play for you unless you redo my contract, right? And we've seen him do it over and over again. That's kind of what I expect to see if the Dolphins can find the team that will match the compensation from a draft pick perspective. But I think it's going to go deeper than that, Ramsey also is going to be able to choose that team by, threatening not to play for them.
Yeah, I think the big thing everyone wants to know is what would the compensation be for Jalen Ramsey? And I've given a little bit of tidbits of info on OnlyFins. Once again, make sure you guys join OnlyFins. If you want the vetted information, which Alf, CK, Simon, and all of us give, I believe it's $5.99 a month. Alf, correct me if I'm wrong.
All access is $4.99 a month.
All access is $4.99 a month.
If you want to participate just with the read only, it's $2.99 a month. And vetted, we usually like people to be on there for a while before we allow you in vetted. Vetted is $24.99 a month. But
there we go.
We usually don't take stragglers off the street for vetted.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. But I've detailed some potential compensation. One thing out right now, and I'll outright say it, is Atlanta right now is the heavy favorites just because of the connection of Jalen Ramsey and Raheem Morris. He's a big Raheem Morris fan. The defense is almost the exact same as he played it when he won the Super Bowl with the Rams, and the defense coordinator being Raheem Morris. The compensation is going to be interesting because you think the Miami Dolphins might be able to get a potential day 2 pick, whether it be a second or third rounder. I'm more so of the opinion, hey, this is a guy who's 31, who's not the same guy he was in his prime, and he might not play as an outside corner, especially with his age, his injuries. If we're talking about evaluation, is that team and is Miami going to value him as a top flight outside corner, or are they going to value him as a safety later on in his career? And it really depends on where Jalen Ramsey wants to go to and what the compensation Chris Greer wants to collect for the Dolphins.
Yeah, I think with Ramsey, it's kind of an odd situation because, I mean, you just go back to where the Dolphins were with him a couple of years ago, and the compensation was Hunter Long and a third-round pick, and you're looking at a guy that's a few more years down the road, who's got even more of an injury history now, having missed 8 games just a couple of years ago. It's tough to envision the Dolphins getting plus value for Ramsey, at least in comparison to what they gave up for him. But I do think that there will be a team out there that looks at him and says that he can still kind of be the piece that puts us over the top. And I think that the Dolphins are in the position to where they're still going to have to eat a decent amount of this deal in a trade, no matter what. Whether it's pre-June 1st or post-June 1st, they're still going to be having to deal with some dead money. So maybe some other team is willing to give a little bit more up in draft capital for some of that financial relief, even though an extension is probably going to have to come right after that. But the thing that interests me now is it really feels like the Dolphins have kind of been cornered into defensive back in the first round or first or second round. I know some people still go back and forth between that and interior of the defensive line, but I think that they're kind of cornered to take a defensive back at this point. Am I wrong in thinking that at this point, guys?
I think that's pretty accurate. Like I would expect that at this point. Like if you're gonna bet this for next Thursday, how can you not put your money on a defensive back? And if you've done enough mocks, and personally, I don't really like going through a lot of these places like the PFNs. Not that I have anything against them. I think they do a fine job, but sometimes I don't think it's very realistic. But if you sit down there and you look at the top, like 8 picks, top 10 picks, you kind of start seeing how there's a very distinct possibility that one of the top 2 corners, Will Anderson, Janae Barron, that they're going to drop right to you at 13. And if they do, I don't see how you don't take one of the 2, because if you've gone over this class as much as we have, I think that, look, it's a very good class for cornerbacks, but I don't think you're taking any other cornerback in the first round but those 2. So now you have a glaring need. You get to have, you get to get one of the best players in the draft, because look, on any board, I think both of those guys are top 10 guys. Will Anderson on most big boards is a top 5 talent. If one drops to you, I don't know how you don't take them. Especially when you look at the defensive tackle class, like it's so deep. Like I said, I have a list of about 18 guys that I'll take 2 of in this draft. So
Yeah.
if the list is that big of defensive tackles, there's 18 guys that you'll take 2 of to play in your rotation, then I'm fine passing on a defensive tackle in the first round. Get me that defensive back. Give me that cornerback. That's who I would take at 13. So, yeah, it's the safest of all bets, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. Chris Greer talked about how this draft is strong in the positions that they need. And I think that they have put themselves in a position where, I don't know, to me it seems very obvious in those first 2 picks they need to add a cornerback and they need to add a interior defensive lineman. And when you look at those players, like you talked about, Alf, you got Johnson and Barron, who is significantly ahead of the rest of the class. And in my opinion, for defensive tackles, Mason Graham is the one guy that's ahead of the rest of them. But there's a huge pool of those defensive tackles that should be there at pick 48 that, you can feel safer going with a Johnson or a Barron at pick 13 and still having a defensive tackle that can come in and start from day one that you really like at 48. Whereas if you were to reverse that and go defensive tackle in the first round, there are cornerbacks that I like in round 2, but there's a big difference in my confidence level of those guys being able to step in and, be a starter from day one compared to Barron and Johnson.
I think it really becomes the distinct possibility of what the Dolphins like and what Anthony Weaver likes specifically for their corners. It really depends if Anthony Weaver is going to stick with this same scheme as he did last year in his first year, which was very zone heavy, or whether or not he changes it up, mixes it up based on the players that he likes and makes it completely zone based, or moves towards a little bit towards man coverage. And I think it depends on who they would take at number 13. If it's Will Johnson, I think they're going to stick with what they did last year. He solves a lot of issues. He becomes your premier cornerback number 1. But there are those nagging injury concerns, specifically with 5 can be concerning. I'm not concerned about that. If you take a look at his film, he runs much faster than a 4.5. 40 time is just straight line speed. For Jahdae Barron, he's 5'11", I think 195, 196. I think for an outside zone corner or even an outside man corner, especially with his arms, that's a little bit too small, in my opinion. I think there was a little bit of a tidbit I saw where I think Barron played 20% of his snaps in man press, but he primarily played as the nickel and a little bit of safety, and he's very versatile. I do think that those guys will be gone before 13 from the mocks that I'm seeing, that they are going high, they are going early. And we have to potentially take a look at the rest of the cornerback draft class, like a guy like Dorian Strong, who our friends Kyle Krabs mocks him to Cam Smith. There's already a Cam Smith on the roster. You need an aggressive man corner. That's what Dorian Strong is. That's what Cam Smith can be if he is already out of the doghouse. And Chris Greer said in the presser just a couple of days ago that we expect him to start. We expect him to, be a dog in this fight. The other guy I'm looking at, especially in the 5th or 6th round late, is LSU's Alexander. He was a bit of a fun surprise. He's very physically gifted. He's 6'2", 190. He's able to track the ball well in the air. And he's a very good tackler, I will say. Even in the run game, you don't see a lot of great tacklers around the box area like Jalen Ramsey is. So that can make up for some tackling issues that Cam Smith comes up with, a guy like Dorian Strong as well.
One thing I got to say about look, I'm a huge fan of Dorian Strong, but I think he's more of a early day 3 guy. But one thing that this team has kind of revealed to some in the media is that they plan on playing a lot more press man this coming season. So I would start looking at all these prospects in that light.
Yeah, and I mean with a guy like Strong, that it's not that he can't do that, and he does do some of the man stuff really well, but if you're looking at a team where now you no longer have Kendall Fuller and you no longer have Jalen Ramsey, one of the things that can get Dorian Strong kind of in trouble is that he does tend to be a little bit handsy in coverage. And if you're going to be moving into a scheme where that's kind of what you're going to be doing, I do think that you're maybe subjecting him to that just a little bit more than anticipated. So I don't know if I really love that. And then with a guy like Zy Alexander, he's physically gifted in terms of height and weight, and in terms of his ability to tackle in the box. I think he's actually somebody that you can almost kind of turn into like an Ifeatu Melifonwu light, actually, and maybe see what he can do at safety a little bit. Because I don't know if you're going to be doing that, the man bump and run. I don't know if he has the athleticism really to be that kind of corner on the outside on a man-to-man basis in terms of some of the that you would want on an island for this team.
I think day 3, a guy that you have to put squarely in your crosshairs, maybe best in class on day 3, is Kobe Bryant. Like if you're going to play more press man, like that's the guy you want. And he's an absolute dog. He'll get in your face. And he didn't run poorly either, I believe, what did he fire off, a 4.53 or something like that? And then he ran.
Yeah, he did something like that.
That's not bad.
There's another. Yeah,
that's not bad,
guy.
Especially for somebody with his length. That's perfectly fine. So that's who I would look as far as day 3. But again, for the 13th pick, it's the mission is pretty clear.
Yeah. I think outside of that, especially for another pressman corner, specifically in the nickel, if they do tend to move Kader Kohu a little bit outside or they want to move him around, I'm taking a look at Kansas State's Jacob Parrish. A little bit undersized, but right where you want him as a nickel. he's not handsy. He doesn't get called for it, but man, is he really aggressive up against slot corners and even the bigger body tight ends? He can give them a little bit of trouble specifically off the line. And with the Dolphins' current litany of pass rushers who are healthy, who should be healthy, who should be starting by week 1, that gives them enough time where they can mess up the quarterback's read and Parrish, Kohu, whoever is their nickel corner, if they do decide to go that route later on. That may help and get a lot of other receivers frustrated. But before we move on to the other position players, we're going to go to break. All right. We're going to go to break in a little bit. We'll talk a little bit about some wide receivers, some offensive linemen, and some defensive linemen as well. Do you ever watch sports and find yourself wishing there was a way to get into the game? With Underdog, there's finally a way to make picks on sports without leaving the house. The game is in your hands. To play, choose whether a player will go higher or lower on one of their stats. The play-in tournament is happening and playoff basketball is almost here. So they've got all your favorite players and teams and stars to choose from. To play whether a player will go higher or lower, such as rebounds, points, or assists, and they have even more than that. Create entries with all your basketball picks or mix and match across other sports. You can play with as little as $1, and if you get everything right, you can win up to 1,000 times your money. So turn $1 into 1,000 just with your sports knowledge. Download the Underdog app and sign up now using promo code 3yards to unlock a special offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash. When you make your first deposit, join in on the fun when you sign up with promo code 3yards. Claim your special offer today and get up to $1,000 in bonus cash.
Be 18 plus, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 19 plus in Alabama, New England, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP, 1-800-639-8783, or text NEXT-STEP to 53342. In New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE NY or text Hope NY to 467-369.
All right, and we are back. Gentlemen, we talked a lot about the cornerback class, but there's also another glaring need still on the defensive side on the ball, specifically the trenches. Alf, I know you said you may not want to go defensive lineman in the first round, with how deep it is. And Eric, if the Dolphins have the opportunity to trade back, pending if one of those top corners or even Malachi Starks is not there, what's your read on what can happen later on in the first, or do you think they'll double up later on?
So ultimately, I do think that defensive tackle is a position in which the Dolphins will take a look at later on in the draft, regardless of if they use a day 1 or 2 pick on that spot. Because I think that you look at the position right now and it's not just incomplete. Forget depth for a second. You don't even know if you have your starters along the defensive line. I mean, you don't, outside of Sealer at least. And then behind that, you've really only got Benito Jones in terms of usable NFL caliber players along the defensive line. You have to add at least 2, regardless of whatever it is that you do in the first round. If we're talking later first round guys, I like a Tyleik Williams. I like a Derek Harmon as 2 guys that I would probably prioritize if that is the route that you go and it is late round 1. But again, I think that there's a lot to like in the later rounds in terms of defensive linemen. I know Alf has talked about Simeon Barrow quite a bit. I like him in the 5th, 6th round range. I think he's a fantastic penetrator from that interior defensive lineman spot. Bit of a smaller guy, but I think he adds a really good look in terms of what your pass rush can provide for you. And then we've talked about guys like CJ West, It's guys that can go in that third, fourth round kind of range. I just think that there's a lot of depth in this class, and they're going to have to add at least 2 along the defensive line.
Yeah, I definitely do agree that they need to add at least 2 of them. One of my targets, and I know Coach has talked about him in depth a little bit, has been Enes Peoples out of Virginia Tech. More so, the Dolphins need more pass rushing juice, especially in a very heavily offensive dominated AFC conference. He's probably my 15th to 18th ranked defensive tackle on the board. He's 6', 6'1", maybe a stretch if you say 6'2", around 282 pounds. He enters the draft after back-to-back seasons of elite pass rushing production. PFF has him at 90.1 in 2023, 91.2 in 2024. He's primarily the guy you put in the B gap between the center and the guard. He's got a very quick get off. He can be one of those guys that can also run those stunts with Zach Sealer on third and shorts, third and longs as well. But don't necessarily ask him to, plug up those blocks and do well on run defense. He's more of that quick-footed, quick-sided pass rusher. And the other guy, primarily for run stopping, and he can actually play as a fullback on the offensive side of the ball, is Ole Miss's J.J. Pegs. He's 6'2", 310 pounds. A bit.
Pegues. His name is Pegues.
Pegues.
Yeah.
Pegues. Thank you, J.J. Pegues.
Yeah, I was gonna mention him. Yeah, and you heard that correctly. He's 6'2.5", 310 pounds, and they use him as a short yardage goal line back.
Yeah, exactly. He really does move well with his stocky body. Again, quick-footed. One thing you want for defensive tackles, you want them to get off the ball really, really fast. He wins in those gaps. He's able to redirect ball carries, and that's something you want alongside a guy like Zach Sealer, alongside Benito Jones, and he's young, right? He's young alongside the other guy I mentioned, Enes Peoples. So you can utilize Pegues in short yardage, in runs. He can be asked to plug up those gaps as well, especially in those heavy goal line situations. I do think that he would definitely be a target in the second, fifth round pick for the Dolphins if they do double up.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of players along the defensive line, and there's a lot to like along the defensive line. And we've talked a lot about the defensive side of the football to this point between the defensive backs and the defensive linemen. I do want to get into along the offensive side of the football, particularly considering the Tyreek Hill news. One of the guys that's kind of been a really late riser kind of in this process is Arkansas's Isaac Tisla. Really some things that kind of pop out at you is nearly 20 yards per reception, 6'4", 4'4", 340. But the thing that I like the most about him is he's 6'4", 215, and he plays like it. He's not the most crisp route runner in the world, but guys at that size and speed, you rarely need them to be. And he is physical as all get out in the run game. I mean, I look at him and I see a slightly faster Mac Hollins. And I think that, I really like what Mac Hollins brought to the team at the time. I think they've kind of missed him since he's been gone. So I think Isaac Tisla would be a really solid addition to the wide receiver room, especially if you're looking at a late round guy. Although I don't know how late he's going to be at this point, given the way that he's kind of rising up the boards.
Yeah. Who are the two guys on your board, Alf?
As far as wide receivers?
Yeah, late round wide receivers.
Well, late round wide receivers, I'm not too into in this draft because I think you could do better as UDFAs. Okay, there's going to be a very, very talented wide receiver that's just going to drop like a rock in this draft. And at some point, do you just close your eyes and take him? And that's Isaiah Bond of Texas. The guy, when he declared for the draft, the next day he turned himself into the police. Okay, that's kind of a problem. He's had problems since. It's the kind where it's really gonna bust him down. But the guy that I really look at, and here's the thing, like if you're looking at him and you're thinking to yourself, you know what, this is a guy we could sneak in and take him with a 4th round pick, and he's gonna be really, really, I discovered something that nobody else has discovered. If you're thinking that way, you're probably wrong. And my candidate for that is Alec Ayamonor of Stanford. If you watch his film, he does absolutely everything well. And he even has tape from last season, not this past season, but the year before, of him absolutely annihilating Travis Hunter in coverage, man-to-man, one-on-one. He had 258 yards receiving in the second half, I believe. 3 touchdowns in that huge comeback against Colorado. He is like Dolphins got Westbrook-Akine. He would be, I think, an upgrade on Westbrook-Akine because that's the kind of player he is. He's physical, fast because he ran 4.4 at almost 210 pounds. And that's a guy that I'm thinking to myself, man, if he's in the 4th round, there's no way on earth you can pass up on him. My issue is I think he's one of those guys that's going to sneak into the 2nd round and everybody's going to be surprised. One guy I would look at late on day 3 is Jimmy Horn Jr. of Colorado. He has really good return chops, and if you watch his film, he plays bigger than what he actually is. So if you want a guy for the back end of the wide receiver room, because remember they got Taj Washington coming back this year, and he was really promising in all the rookie camps last year. So I think they have a pretty full boat at wide receiver, but if you're going to take a shot at somebody late in this draft, why not Jimmy Horn Jr.?
Yeah, I like 2 guys. One of them is actually a Miami guy, Sam Brown Jr., who the Dolphins called to their local pro day as well.
Yep.
Didn't really make the same splash as his former transfer teammate, Matthew Golden, but he's got those intriguing NFL traits. He's got a really solid size speed profile. Separation-wise, not like Tyreek ability, but it's above average. Also not the same as Jalen Waddle. But if you already have an elite separator like Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, that's going to make it much, much easier for you. Definitely has developmental potential as well. If Tyreek Hill is not there, you get a bit of a bigger body guy. I do think he'll have to improve his release package and physicality at the catch point if he were to become, a 3rd or 4th wide receiver for this team. But the other guy that not a lot of people are talking about is Juice Wells. First name is actually Antoine. He went from JMU to South Carolina to Ole Miss. His 2022 and 2023 tape was outstanding, but last year he took a step back. 6 foot, 190 pounds, primarily plays in the slot, sometimes even as the Y and the Z. Has a release package, has the physicality at the catch point. He plays bigger than he is, and also run blocks. But just the production from him last season was not something you would see, considering he had upward trajectory year after year.
Yeah, so there's definitely some good talent at wide receiver later on in the draft. One of the positions that we have touched on quite a bit, and it's a shame Coach Eric isn't here for the offensive line talk as we're getting to it. But a couple of names that we had kind of talked about and kicked around prior to recording today were Miles Frazier and Jackson Slater. And I think that these are guys that probably aren't super late in the draft, 6th, 7th round guys. These are probably more your 4th or 5th round guys at this point. As much as they've kind of moved up, especially Slater at this point, I think with Jackson Slater, really it's just if he gets the playbook and he understands it, I think he's a guy that has sneaky day 1 starter potential. There's not a lot that he doesn't do well along the offensive line. He's got really good play strength. He's an exceptional athlete for the position. Are there some, occasional hand placement issues? Yes, but that's stuff that can be worked out within the course of a training camp, really, or a couple with Brent Berry. So I don't have many reservations about Jackson Slater. Obviously, the competition at the FCS level, but he looked really good at the Senior Bowl. And then with Miles Frazier, I think that one of the biggest positives with him is, as a guy that was an FIU transfer going to LSU, we struggled in 23, got better in 24. You always like to see kind of that progression out of guys, especially after they have that they struggle with that jump in competition. He kind of conquered that, and I think that NFL teams like to see that at the next level.
Yeah. One thing I can say about those two guys, and I think it's a great choice. I don't know if Coach is going to be coming back in here or not, but I'd love to get his input on this, and I'd like to get your input on this, both of you. Jackson Slater, I think, is a perfect scheme fit for this team.
Yep.
And I like the two guys that you pick because it's a great contrast. One guy is a perfect scheme fit in Jackson Slater, and you could really see how this guy can actually be molded into a mainstay on this team, okay? Because he could actually do everything. You can run the entire playbook with him. But Miles Frazier possesses one skill that I felt that this team should have concentrated on, and that's a reason why I wanted Will Hernandez, okay? Miles Frazier has one of the best anchors of any guard in this draft class. I think you want something like that. You want guards up the middle with good anchors, especially in pass pro, to keep trash from Tua's feet and keep that pocket clean up the middle for Tua Tagovailoa. Because if you've ever noticed when Tua has his bad games is when he has trash at his feet and he's getting pressure from the A-gap. So Miles Frazier goes a long way toward fixing that. I think he would be a day one starter on this team because you could just play him. You could play him at right guard, and you could play James Daniels at left guard. Remember, James Daniels played that in Chicago to start his career. And James Daniels could essentially babysit Patrick Paul while Austin Jackson can babysit Miles Frazier. And you're going to have a pretty clean pocket up the middle. You're going to have a pretty shifty and clean pocket. And with two guys with really good anchors up the middle, I think that would upgrade this offensive line considerably. Of course, the flip side to all of that is all of the offensive line targets I had before are all still out there. And I think that the reason that they're all still out there is because they're probably waiting on Miami and a few other teams to see what they do during the draft. And then afterwards, if they just say, okay, now we're going to fill holes here with the second wave of free agency. So if they do go in the draft for a guard, I like both of those guys. Those guys will be at the top of my list. Miles Frazier, Jackson Slater. Those will be my top two guys.
Yeah, those pretty good options as well. Frazier obviously didn't graduate from my alma mater, but went there. He was, I think, one of the very few offensive linemen that did not allow a sack in 2024. He only let up one quarterback hit and 12 hurries on 579, basically 580 pass blocking snaps, which is pretty good. He went from CUSA talent to straight up SEC talent, like a lot of talented players on that SEC defensive line and those SEC defenses. There's no shortage of NFL defensive linemen there, and a lot of the top prospects on the defensive line are former SEC defensive linemen.
Look, if you guys want a really good film watching session, just put on a bunch of Georgia Bulldog games. If you want to look at guard play, because Tate Ratledge and Dylan Fairchild, both of them should be there at the bottom end of day 2, maybe at the top end of day 3, and I think both should be on the short list for Miami.
Yeah, they could be. We talk a lot about anchors in this guard play. Frazier has it as well. He's also shifty. He's mobile. He can get up there to the second level while he block those linebackers and take cornerbacks out of the way. As for Jackson Slater, we had him on the show. Coach and I had a lot of questions for him, especially about landmarks, his footing, where he needs to be on specific plays that the Dolphins usually run on those crack tosses, those sweeps, a little bit of the gap end zone schemes, as he pretty much passed the test with flying colors. I will say that he did let us know that he did not even have any formal meetings with the Dolphins, hasn't had any interviews with that either. So that leads me to believe that maybe the Dolphins aren't necessarily circling for Jackson Slater early or maybe even late. But if it comes to it, I think this is one of those guys where if it's the Cole Strange and Quinn Miners type of fold, where it's a small school guy succeeding in the NFL, and if he were to go to Miami, I think he would be a quality starter and a long.
Yeah, I mean the thing between the two guys, right, is that I think Frazier comes in and he's probably a starter and has maybe a more immediate impact than a Jackson Slater might if both guys were to come in and be a starter out the gate. My inclination though is okay, well, if you're getting Frazier, you're getting a guy that you know is going to be a starter day one. I think with Slater, there is some versatility upside in that, you know, maybe the Dolphins do decide that they go circle back and talk to Will Hernandez and they draft Slater to kind of be that guy in waiting for whether it's Hernandez or Daniels. And he's a guy that can come in and kind of play and be that kind of Swiss Army knife, you know, sixth offensive lineman that can come in and spell you at really almost any of the five offensive line spots. You know, kind of like a poor man's, well, not poor man's, but kind of a, you know, a Gray Zabel light kind of, if that's a guy that you're looking at in that first, second round conversation. But we are now 1 week away from the first round. The Dolphins presumably will be making the pick at 13. We're going to be here for if they make the pick, if they don't make the pick, if they trade down, if they trade up, any of it, we're going to be here for it. It'll be me, it'll be Hussam, it'll be Coach Eric, breaking down what we saw in day one and what it could mean for day 2 and 3 of the draft. It was a lot of fun talking later round prospects with you guys that maybe a lot of fans weren't super familiar with prior to, but hopefully there's some new favorites out there now as far as day 3 goes for the draft. So we thank you guys again for watching. Do not forget the promo codes 3yards20 for Thompson Cigar, as well as the promo code 3 yards on Underdog. Thank you guys so much. We will keep you covered here with more draft coverage on the way. Hussam, say the thing.
Go Fins, baby.
And thank you very much to Al for talking some later round prospects with us. We do appreciate having the big boss on the show this evening.
Thank you for having me.